Hi, this is János. It is Real World Audio. I mean, the channel is Real World Audio, and uh, and today I'm continuing reviewing La Grande, the construction of La Grande, going through ideas, sharing thoughts, and these are driven by Steve's adventures and experience with La Grande that he has shared with me, shared with us. And here what you see in the background, this is from Steve's website at Electric Beach Audio. And as you see, he's a very experienced DIY speaker builder. And that's what we see, one of his babies right here. And if you want to see more, you can have a look at his website. I will put the link down below. And now we are going to have a look at his report. So I'm reading on my screen, that's why I'm looking down. So this report is on Steve's La Grande, and he built it with the Mark Audio driver. So report: initial experience with Mark Audio CHP70 driver was both very good and very bad. With some recordings, I can easily hear the design intentions and potential, the freedom in the sound projection, inner detail exposed, and the holographic soundscape presented. Wonderful. Other recordings became unlistenable as the driver unloaded, even at low volume, and the distortion was extreme, with the cone flapping happily in the wind. I have long found this to be an Achilles heel of the Mark Audio long throw, low mass approach to creating strong bass with a small full range driver. I understand that a large volume box tuned for low frequency and amp control exposed this. So basically, when you put these Mark Audio drivers in a much smaller cabinet, you will have much less of this issue that they just completely poop out when on certain material. But when you put them in a tiny box, you are not going to hear big sound from them. They are going to have much more limited frequency bandwidth, and um, and yeah, so that's it. So then you can push them to project an astonishing sound that you would not expect from that drivers, but that will also come with certain limitations that when they are pushed beyond their capacity, they spectacularly fail. And that is true to other drivers as well. And I noticed it with the Fostex too, that when it doesn't like something, it really fails doing at it. But I would say that yes, as Steve was thinking, that the failure is much less spectacular. That's true. The transition is much gentler, and you can push them to quite a bit more. And I would say you still cannot push them to have that much sound pressure and presentation as we get from an 8-inch driver. That's simply not possible. Physics does not allow it. These small drivers do have the limitation of listening to them at normal volumes for any material, and higher volumes for materials that don't push them beyond the limits. Um, and and others, some people here would say that, oh, screw that, why don't you just go for an 8-inch driver? And no, one thing is that for the 8-inch driver you need a way bigger cabinet, and you also need much more money. The 8-inch driver costs many times more than the smaller driver does. And but now others would say that, okay, János, but you've been showing us like some expensive drivers that you can put in here, not just cheap drivers. And yeah, but when you put like an expensive 5-inch driver, 5-inch driver in the La Grande, you want to compare it to the same level at an 8-inch driver, and those will be also exponentially more expensive. So when you compare apples to apples, it's the price difference is always there. And also for a lot of people it's not about the price difference, it's about the size difference, so that you can, everyone, almost everyone can put like a Legrand size loudspeaker in their living room, but like putting a 100+ liter inner air volume cabinet in your living room, now that's a big challenge, and that's where most people fail, because it's not acceptable in many homes. There's no such space or dedicated space for that big speakers, and that's why these speakers are a special project, because they allow to enter the world of higher quality sound at a smaller footprint, but they don't allow it to enter the really loud representation. You cannot push even Legrand with the Fostex driver, you can't push it to really loud volumes. It cannot compete at all with, for example, what the Cube Audio 8-inch drivers can do in the void pipe. With that one, I think it can really produce sound pressure levels in a realistic living room that that 99% of people find it like, wow, this plays really loud, really awesome, I don't need any more volume. You will be listening only at a fraction of what they can reproduce with Legrand. I certainly found for myself that initially I just had to like make sure that I don't play them too loud, but that also has an advantage as well, that your listening habits will change, and they will change for the better, because you will adapt to listening a couple dB quieter than you normally listen to, and on the long run this will be the biggest benefit of your audio life you ever have, because it will, number one, improve your listening skills. So when you listen a tiny bit quieter, then your ears and your brain has to work a little bit harder to pick up things, but it will learn. And after a while you will notice that when you go back to other speakers, that you don't even want to listen that loud, and you will find out problems that they present at that high volume, and also you will find one more thing is when you have speakers that are optimized for playing loud, when you want to turn the volume down, they can't do that. They will fall apart, and the sound will collapse. So why Legrand, I think, why it is special as a speaker and deserves the attention of those who want high quality, is that their ability to project a big sound at a lower SPL. And I think that's the number one thing that audiophiles want everywhere around the world, is the ability to have great sound without bugging the neighbors, without blasting your ears, without fatigue. And they can do that with the Fostex driver, certainly. And I noticed, for example, since I have the Legrand with me at my workplace, I've never even tried to push their limits. I'm just playing them just at a quiet to moderate level all the times, and I'm super happy with them. And actually yesterday I cranked them up a little bit, but even then I did not play them super loud, just at a normal, maybe a tiny bit loudish, but that's it. And I played some ambient techno music to my coworker, who is actually a DJ. So you can kind of like maybe get a feel where this is going, and she was impressed to death with them. This is like this is amazing, and I was not even cranking them, just listened normally, so we could talk without raising our voices, and the music was playing, creating a fantastic ambience. We were swimming in the sound. It was really a good experience, and and even she did not have the feel that you want to crank the sound to make it better. It was the experience that we wanted. And of course, if it would be louder, it would be louder. but um, but really, that's something that you can't really do it if it's like a really a bass heavy material. It is able to create the ambience, but not at that high SPL level that some people would want. That this design cannot go there. So these 4-inch, 5-inch drivers, this land is able to create big sound, is able to create big experience, but it's incapable to create it at like a 90 or 100 dB SPLs, where it's like for 100 plus dB. It cannot go there. It can push 90 dB at peaks, but 90 dB sustained is already even beyond the first axis. And I would say, yeah, the Mark audios would break up even before that. So what Steve finished his thoughts about this with was that I expect the Fostex and Tank Band limited cone excursion will fare much better. Bass from such small drivers can most often be compared to seeing an elephant dance. We are so amazed to see it dance that we don't notice the quality of the dancing. So I think that that's the number one thing that I see for everyone when they hear it, is just they can't believe that these tiny drivers can produce that big sound at all. It's kind of like it certainly scrambled my brains the first time I heard it. Like I could not put the two together. How come these tiny speakers with these tiny drivers produce that big sound? And when I talked to Nelly, when I had them here in my room next to the Altex speakers, whenever we were just listening to them, Nelly didn't know which one we are playing. Are we playing to the Altex, to the voiceover asset? And I told her, no, we are playing the small ones. And she said, okay, they just sound the same in a way that both of them project the same big sound. Because whenever you put next to each other a big loudspeaker about the voiceover asset, which loads the room, that you feel that the sound is present in the room and not some squeaky show being beamed at you from some narrow nasal pinch nose, the high-end monstrosity, but it's like it's there in the room. Their presence is there, and the most important part is not the presence when you crank it to 11 to bring the voice down, but the presence still stays there when you decrease the volume, so that at a listenable level where you can sustain an experience, a listening experience that you can listen day in, day out, and it stays there. And when you have those narrow baffle commercial speakers, most of them, when you turn them down to such a level, they collapse. The production collapses. It becomes this kind of like a naked emperor without the costume. Like he's not a strong guy. He's just a pipsqueak pretending to be a strong one when he's like shouting at the top of his lungs. But when he's not shouting, just speaking normally, it turns out, man, he does not have the ability or the qualities. And that's where the big speakers are different ilk, different brethren, so that when you turn the volume down, they still load the room. They are effortlessly playing. But who has the space for a 200-300 liter volume cabinet that takes up as much space as the refrigerator in your kitchen? And yes, that's what the La Grande is able to do, but only at a normal volume. If we want to push it to a volume that we would push like a commercial speaker to make that commercial speaker sound good, there it will crap out. With I would say most likely with any driver, any 4-inch driver we placed in it. And the only partial solution to that problem is what Steve brought up, is that he was thinking about adding a second driver, and actually that has been also my thought for the next step of the evolution for Grande, is adding a second driver. And Steve was doing like a long distance mind reading, and yes, definitely. So what I would recommend, and what would be my next step, is now I'm looking at Steve's speaker. Imagine now that this is Grande. It is not Grande. It's Steve's speaker, and but we have the same idea, that here we have the front of the speaker, we have a driver in the front, and the same thing is going on with Grande. And how I would add the second driver is what we see here, that Steve has added the tweeter on the top to fire up. I would add the second driver to fire at the top. And why is that? Number one thing, if you add the two drivers in the front, you are going to have phase cancellations between the two drivers because of the distance between the two of them. And both of them will be beaming at you, so you will have two on-axis responses fighting each other, canceling, adding up. It will be a nightmare, especially at the higher frequencies. So now, if we are firing one of them upwards, then what we will have is the sound is expanding as a bubble. The sound always wants to expand as a bubble, and basically that gives a more pronounced omnidirectivity to the loudspeaker, and that's how I would add the second driver, is to fire it up, and I would add it, place it at the exact center of the top baffle. That would be my first starting point to experiment, and then actually you can experiment moving it around to see and if it works better or not. But why I would mount it at the center is to load the driver evenly, to give it the biggest chance to load it to the lowest possible frequency, to give it the best acoustic support that it can. And then that will also give it a chance to just put the two in series, so you will have a 16 ohm loudspeaker for tube amplifiers, or you can put them in parallel, and that will create a 4 ohm load if you have like a high current solid state amplifier. Then you can enjoy the high current ability with the 4 ohm load. And if you have a tube amplifier, then you can enjoy the benefits of a 16 ohm. And there what would happen is that several things. So when we double up the driver, I would recommend to put the exact same driver up here that you have in the front. Number one thing, efficiency, sensitivity will go up way higher because we have double the drivers, and they add up. Their output will add up. It will become more sensitive, and that sensitivity increase is enough, I think, to take it out to a zone that it will be much more reachable for a wider audience, so that its high SPL capacity will improve one step over, I would say one level over, for two reasons. One, it requires less power to reach a higher SPL, and the other thing is that when you reach that higher SPL, each of the drivers just have to travel half as much compared to a single driver doing the travel. So you are going to break up to reach that zone where the elephant dance becomes the elephant falling on the ground and just shaking and demolishing the house. So the elephant will be able to dance at a much more extended range, and that dance won't be will be also much more higher SPR. So less, with less effort we are getting more output. So that, and the two together, I would say maybe like a 7, 8, 9 dB or maybe even a 10 dB advantage as far as where the problems start happening will happen much later on. And now, because the two drivers are loading the same volume cabinet, the breakup will be much more graceful compared to a single driver breaking up, because the air volume that you see is half of the cabinet volume compared to what a single driver sees. So basically the internal acoustic suspension will be twice as tight compared to a single driver. So that's why even if we use the Mark Audio driver, its breakup will be much more graceful compared to a single driver. However, there will be a negative with the two drivers coming up, and that negative was one thing why I did not include this in the first version of Grande. And those negatives are twofold. One of them, you need double the amount of drivers, so it's going to be twice as much expensive. And the other thing is that the two drivers will not benefit the entire frequency range. It will just benefit from the high frequencies to the bottom of the mid bass. The low end will not rise up. So you will see that added SPL, that adding extra driver does to the mid bass and on up, but for the deep bass it won't go higher, because for that to happen we would need to double the cabinet volume as well, and then we would see like a 40 hertz and below rising up as well. So now like the deep bass will stay where it is now and the rest will be higher. So the net result of that will be that the speakers will actually sound a little bit smaller. So when you play them at the same SPL, the single driver Grande would appear as if it was a bigger cabinet. And however, where the difference will shine up is that when you crank them louder, than the one that has two drivers that can play much louder, and when you push it, the change between playing gracefully to crapping out, it will be much more gradual, much more graceful, and that will give you a lot of extra headroom over the small Grande cabinet. And it is something actually that most people who have commercial loudspeakers at home, they would be more comfortable with that, with the ability to just crank them up like as loud as they can. It's a natural thing. But so really, you for the Grandes as they are now, you need people who are, I would say, in their audio journey beyond that phase, that for them a good sound must be always at an ear-splitting level. So Grande as it is now is specifically for those people who want good sound, but not at a crazy loud level, just at a normal playing level and not higher than that. There will be some songs that it can produce at a higher level than that, and that's when we have the impression of the elephant dancing, seeing something you would have never experienced, but it cannot dance to every tune. There's only a few tunes that it can dance to, and when I was playing different songs, honestly, I cannot give like an exact list or criteria when it can dance, when it cannot, because there were certain things that I expected that it can dance easily to, and it crapped out, and there were some things I threw at it, I thought it would be a complete cluster failure, and it's like, wow, this was amazing. Like when I threw the Vanamaker organ, church organ at it, and I played it at a really reasonable volume where I didn't miss anything from the presentation. It's just like, wow. It sounded great. Of course, I could hear that there were some issues in the bass, some loosening, some breakup, but that happened in such a graceful manner that the overall presentation I got from it was still much more preferable to comparing to a commercial speaker that had the bass like tight, like, you know, like tightened into a chokehold, but the mid-range and the high frequencies just nah. So if those have problems, I don't care if the bass is so tight. If the overall impression is not like a church organ, but something like a digitized monstrosity, I don't want to listen to that at, not even at a normal volume, let alone at ear-splitting volumes. No. Maybe in the beginning of our audio journeys, that's fun to crank it out. It's fun to have listening fatigue after that, but after some experience with audio, I can tell you guys that if you want your audio journey to last for a long time, be super duper extremely careful of listening fatigue. And if you have gear that causes listening fatigue, stop right away. Stop and do some changes. Because if you don't, then within 10-15 years, you will have no hearing anymore. And it doesn't matter what kind of equipment you want to play around with, you won't be able to hear it, period. So if you want to listen to music, to enjoy what you do later on, then you absolutely must stop listening fatigue gear. Stop that. And whether it's like your habits to crank it too loud, don't crank it where you get listening fatigue, or if you don't crank it and the sound collapses, that's the indication that you need La Grande, so that to give that experience at a volume that your ears can handle, so that 20 years later you can still enjoy this hobby of yours, this passion. And I can tell from my experience, I'm not super old yet, but I'm 20 years older than I was 20 years ago, and I can tell you that 20 years fly by like this. And if you don't take care of your ears, it will go down the drain, and you can't recover it. So going back to experimentation, Steve also asked for one more really critical piece of the La Grande puzzle that a lot of a lot of us have been wondering about, and that's with the height of the driver and the positioning from the floor, because that was something that a lot of us reported, that Gerald reported, that Jürgen and I reported as well, that when you put them on the floor, they sound really different compared to elevating them to heights. And they have strength at either positions, but some strengths are present in the floor. So when they sit on the floor, then they load the room perfectly. You have if you just wander around, you don't sit in the sweet spot, they will play much better there. But when you sit on the sweet spot, you will hear problems in the frequency range. You will have anomalies, reflections coming from the floor, adding up to the output of the driver and creating colorations. So if you lift them up to a stand, the higher you lift, the better they will sound from the sweet spot. But if you are not in the sweet spot, like now I'm sitting here at my workbench, this is where I solder stuff, work on gear, or actually work period, when I have work or I do my videos. And from here, when they are sitting on the floor, they sound absolutely wonderful, and then I have no whatever needs to go beyond them, and they sound like really as big as the Altex sound. And of course, if I put some material that has, let's say, like subsonic bass or whatever, or I want to crank them loud, of course there will be a massive difference between the Altex and them, but that's not the point. Of course there it is, but when I lift them to a stand, then from here they won't sound like that. I need to sit in the sweet spot to get the most out of them. And even from there the bass is much smaller. The sound has shrunk a lot, like the speakers are like 5 times smaller than they were originally, but they are still much bigger than a speaker of that size, but their imaging is really spectacular when they are on a full stand. So could we kind of like merge the two together to like keep the bass response and have that room filling quality? And what my suspicions for that are that by adding the second driver to the top, and when it sits on the floor, it will load the room even better, even though it does a great job already, but just that touch bit elevating that. But when they are on a stand and you have that extra driver on the top, that's when it will compensate that inability that from a stand they are doing a much poorer job of creating an all-encompassing experience. So by adding a second driver on top, I think that will rescue that deficiency quite a bit, although it would not help with the lack of comparative lack of bass compared to when it sits on the floor. And playing around with the height of the driver, I think there it will mostly affect and be affected by the actual driver itself. So whether that driver, how that behaves at 2 kilohertz, does it have that hole there that needs filling up, or maybe it has a 1.5 kilohertz hole, then you want to place it lower than that. That would be my main consideration for the exact driver height in the front. And sadly, like the closer we place it to the floor, the more the floor reflections will interact with it and create a little unbalance to the frequency of the sound. Oops, I think my computer wanted to shut down for a second. Let me see. Is it recording anymore? So I just noticed my computer was not plugged to the power and it was starting to go to sleep. So not sure if it's still recording or not. I see my camera frozen. So I think now I will just stop and to make sure I got this recording. So thank you for listening, and I will wrap up my thoughts in the next episode.